So I still don't understand where the data shipped.
The phases, yeah.
Now I know Washington was strict. I see it. Check, check. See, that's high. How's that? Right there. Right there. Right there. That's about it. Good evening. Welcome to Church by the Side of the Road in our midweek candid COVID conversation broadcast. I'm Pastor Terrence Proctor, Senior Pastor here at Church by the Side of the Road, and we want to greet you with a hearty God bless you, healthy, holy amen. Who is Church by the Side of the Road? We're just some folk who fell in love with the Lord as we met him on the intersection of life and faith. We're a family of believers drawing others to Christ through his word and our example. We have an excellent panel on today. I want to first say we're praying with you, praying for you. Continually send in your prayer requests via the email, the website, or the good old-fashioned voicemail. We have them. We're praying with and for each and every one of you. We're praying for continued healing for each and every one of you, strength and encouragement. Now, why do we do these candid conversations? In lieu of Bible study, which we're still having, thank you, Dr. Winter, on Sunday night, great series on Ephesians. But our goal is, in the midst of the pressure of this current pandemic, is to inform not only our congregation, but our community with a myriad of topics to inspire us to keep growing even in the midst of this hardship, to encourage us not to lose faith, not to lose hope, even to stay connected to friends and family while we are maintaining social distance, and empowering us to be in our best self, even in our best witness. So that's what we're trying to do week after week, and we thank God for all of our guests, for all of you who are chiming in. So again, stay tuned, like it, share it. We're on the YouTube or the Facebook, whichever platform you're watching it in. Buzz your friends, tell them to chime in. So we're going to open in prayer. Father God, we bow in the sufficiency of Christ, trust and knowing you do all things well. Bless this great nation, Lord God. Heal our land from this COVID, and heal our land from the current social unrest and the pre-existing conditions as a byproduct of racism and every other injustice that is woven in the fabric of this great nation, Lord. But give us the courage and the wisdom to work to make it a more perfect union. We're all responsible for this nation to be her best. So heal our land and encourage our people. And we ask this and all the other blessings in your name we pray. And everybody said amen. All right, how y'all doing out there in the internet family? Got a special treat, a dear brother, community co-labor with me, or I with him here in Tukwila, Dr. Flip Herndon, who is the Superintendent of Schools of Tukwila School District, and he's brought with him another dynamic leader in the community, particularly in King County, Seattle in particular. We've stolen him. I'm going to let Dr. Herndon introduce who he has with us. Come on, Doc, tell us who you are, tell us about you. I'm sure some of the kids know you, but the community at large may not know your story.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you again for having us here, Pastor Proctor. Really appreciate it. I'll talk a little bit about myself, and then I'll have our new Chief Academic Officer, Mr. Ted Howard, be able to talk a little bit about himself. So I'm excited to be here. I've been in Tukwila now for about a year and a half.
Okay.
As the interim superintendent in November of 2018, and then applied for a full-time job, and felt really good to be selected as the superintendent and lead. Previous to that, I had been in Seattle Public Schools for 5 years as their chief operations officer, so I oversaw a lot of the operations side, enrollment projections and school construction, that kind of stuff, which was new for me because I'm a career educator. But it opened my eyes to a lot of what makes a big district tick. And then before that, I had been the superintendent of the Bremerton School District for 4 years, 2009 to 2013. Great district over there on the peninsula, really fabulous opportunity. And then previous to that, had worked in Tacoma Public Schools, Shoreline Public Schools as an elementary principal, Mukilteo. I've worked in Massachusetts and New Jersey, I've been a lot of different places, but originally Tacoma, Washington.
All the 253 is in the building.
You got it.
I have a question. What elementary school did you work in Shoreline?
Meridian Park.
Okay, that's all right. I went to Echo Lake for a minute, so
Okay.
we'll ride on y'all.
Yeah.
All right, who did you bring with you?
This is Mr. Ted Howard.
Come on.
Today's his first day, first official day for Tukwila Public Schools, and he agreed to come on today, and I'm really excited to bring him on. I know Ted's going to be fantastic for Tukwila.
And Brother Howard, welcome to the neighborhood. You're no stranger to us, but you got a good job. On the first day, they take you to church. Come on, somebody. Brother Howard, talk to us. Tell. I know you. We've worked together at Franklin and in the community. Tell us who you are and what brought you to Tukwila.
Thank you, Pastor. What brought me to Tukwila is actually Dr. Herndon, a loyal person, strong, intelligent person, as well as strong background in education. I wouldn't have left Seattle Public Schools, the largest district in the state of Washington, if I didn't feel he could actually accomplish the things that he has set forth and talk to me about what he wanted to do. I applied for the position and I was selected, so I'm very happy to be in Tukwila. Previously I've been at Garfield High School for the last 16 years.
You have to whisper that name around it.
And before that, I also attended Garfield High School, born and raised, second generation family member in education. I have 7 siblings. Out of 7 siblings, 5 are in education. My mom is a longtime teacher. My dad was a longtime principal. My mom, just to put it out there, my mom was deceased now. She died of COVID.
Yeah.
And that was a shocker for all of us. At the same time, my parents have instilled in me the values of education, how much it means to all of us, and giving back to the community. So for me, being in Tukwila is nothing different than being in Seattle or anywhere else, because kids are kids wherever we go. And my job is to support Dr. Herndon and move forward, making sure our students here in Tukwila get exactly what they need and their dreams can come true.
Awesome. He's from a legendary family of educators, and your dad, I mean, I know you hear it all the time, but he's like gold jacket Hall of Famer in this region. Before we get to the meat of it, ITs as a Quaker, and I know you went to Garfield, worked at Garfield, and you and I both will agree the greatest time on your resume is when you worked at Franklin. But God has upgraded. All right. All kidding aside, leaving Garfield, you've been a part of some phenomenal work at Garfield. Give me the 2 highlights that you're most proud of, and one of the biggest challenges with working at Garfield.
The biggest challenge, I say, working at Garfield is race relations at Garfield. At any moment in time, you are a principal of, sometimes they say 6 schools, but 5 schools at least, of trying to bring a community together of students and parents who sometimes don't always see eye to eye. So you have to collaborate and make sure you bring people together. One of the biggest successes, I say, at Garfield, amongst everything that we've done, from the Golden Apple Award to just recently our students are selected valedictorians, over 24, 25 of our students. Well, the height was we have 44 valedictorians at Garfield. So for me, the change that I see happening with our ethnic studies program and bringing that into Garfield and watching that grow and explode and our students working together, that at the same time we started doing 9th grade honors for all students. So to me, those 2 successes, meaning that we're starting to not only close the gap, but we're also starting to make sure that gap is supported for all our students to get a quality education, not just, hey, guess what, these students on track are going to get it, but everybody's going to get it. So as we started to move that forward, that was exciting to see that happening, as well as this year we're moving into the all district offenses. There's going to be no suspensions for our students. And so those successes, as we move forward, we are moving into 2020, 2021, making changes happen so our students not only can stay engaged, but stay in the classroom and make sure that they're getting challenged.
Great work, great job. I didn't want to zip by. The entire community grieves with you and your family at the loss of your mother. She's a giant in the community, and that hit a lot of us very hard. So we're praying with you, praying for you. I got hands up. We have got to the question part. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, this is just to acknowledge all of the comments we're getting welcoming Mr. Howard to Tukwila. We have City Council member Deshaun Quinn welcoming a fellow Bulldog.
Oh,
We
Jesus,
have
there go the
some
neighborhood.
Teachers with the district that are saying they are for social justice, and they are very happy to welcome you to Tukwila. Lots of former students and everyone else, just wanting to pass that along to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we're going to go back to Superintendent Herndon. Superintendent, we got a myriad of questions and topics that were sent and cultivated for this great day. And I want to start with giving you a platform to give us a State of the Union for the district. Tell us how things are going in Tukwila School District.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things that really attracted me to Tukwila to begin with, to even become superintendent, was the richness of the community and the commitment of the community. And part of that, just to start with some very basics, were the improvements to the schools. So just the construction that's happening, if you've been around the community, every school's been touched. Elementary schools all got some additions. The work for both Showalter and Foster is wrapping up this summer. The commons area for Foster is probably going to be a little bit longer, but Showalter should be done by the middle of August. And for the most part, the work on Foster should be done too. That was a big commitment by the taxpayers of Tukwila, much appreciated. It's expanding additional learning space. It's going to be fantastic. If you haven't had the chance to walk by, please do so you can see it in action. But it's awesome.
What's the jewel of that construction project?
We've added 12 additional classrooms at Foster, improved some of the math and science spaces, and then expanded the commons, added an auxiliary gymnasium. It's a big price tag. Construction's expensive. Same with Showalter. The gym was expanded a bit, additional classroom space being put in, and then their commons area is also being expanded, commons and kitchen.
Did I see they covered that walkway that I had to go outside to go to the other?
Yeah, to go to the other place. They do. That's now going to be connected, and it's 2-story.
Come on. I don't have to get wet anymore. That's what I'm a little selfish.
Yes.
All right.
So it's really good. Like I said, that should all be wrapping up in August. So we're really excited about that.
Sounds good.
The other parts that we're looking at, we want to make sure that we're hiring quality people. This is a constant thing that happens every year, whether it be central office positions or classroom teachers, custodians, bus drivers, you name it. The key to moving Tukwila forward is hiring really quality people who are committed to this.
Like Mr. Howard.
Mr. Howard. It's no mistake for us hiring him. All the things that you've heard about and his accolades, that's an intentional hire. That's a commitment for us to help move us forward. I was fortunate to get to know Mr. Howard when I was working in Seattle, and so we forged a really good relationship, strong piece there. And like I said, it takes a lot to bring him out of Garfield. So his commitment and what he wants to accomplish, we've had some great conversations. I know he's going to be good for us. But that hiring process is really important for us. That state of the district is an important piece. This year, probably a little fewer hires than normally. Our current situation with COVID is really posing some challenges. That's the other thing we're working on, is what is the reopening in the fall going to look like. We can talk a little bit more about that later. But we're not seeing a lot of staff turnover because people are kind of staying where they're at.
But I will chime in. One of our guests for this evening was the new hire, the new principal at Foster High School, but he's not here because
he's on the East Coast. Yep.
Can't get here yet. Okay.
Unable to be here. So, we're just excited to be able to try and meet the needs of supporting our staff and our students and our families. So we try and make sure that we're identifying, hiring quality people at any position that we're talking about.
Awesome.
Really important for us.
Awesome. As a community leader, I kind of met you during the interim, and we were working on a myriad of things that are going on in Tukwila School District. At this point, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing?
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges in Tukwila. One is we've been seeing the enrollment in Tukwila decline. So the number of students attending Tukwila schools has been on a steady decline. We're seeing that tail off a little bit, but come this fall, there are a lot of districts, we don't know what school enrollment's going to look like. That's one. The other is, we have challenges with our student achievement. We know that. That data is not new for us, and we just need to confront that data. Even sometimes it may look hard. It doesn't mean that people aren't working hard to try and serve the best needs of our students, but we know those outcomes just need to be better.
Okay, what are some of the outcomes? I'm not sure everybody's been to the OPI site. I have the figures here.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So if we're talking about, the demographics of our students, we have high free and reduced lunch population. We have a high percentage of English language learners, 40% almost. That's really high for any district around here. Our students of color, 90%. Only 10% of our student population are Caucasian students. And when you take all of those factors together, the demographics are what we see in a lot of school districts. And because our populations are higher than most places, I'm not satisfied with the outcomes that we get. I don't want to see, I don't think anybody's satisfied with 30, 40% student achievement at grade level in math or science or English language arts, any of the areas.
So by way of clarity, if I say 30% mastery or at standard, we're talking about 70% of people not reaching what the state standard is for math or science or whatever the area, whatever the testing.
Right.
Okay.
In some areas and in some grade levels. And there are some subjects, Mr. Howard being the chief academic officer, he'll be looking a lot at that information too. But, high school science and math, those are really challenging subject areas, and they've been very challenging for our students of color almost no matter what district you're in. So it's a lot of hard work that has to happen there. The other parts, you and I have talked about this. We've had meetings with students and staff just around the ability for students and staff to feel supported, especially our students of color and our staff of color. We've had a lot of turnover in staff. They've shared with me that they haven't felt supported in the past. We certainly want to change that. Same with students. And you and I have talked about, it's not about new policies or procedures. We have those. We need to get to the accountability pieces to say, this is what we need to do, and follow through with what it is we say we're going to do, and make sure people know exactly what the expectations are, what the outcomes are if those are not achieved. This year we've had a lot of conversations with staff over the spring and conversations with the board. I've talked with our labor partners. We are having mandatory training for all of our staff, every single staff person in the district around our race and equity issues and expectations.
Is there any pushback on that, or what is the challenge in that area?
So far, we haven't had any pushback on that. I think once we start getting into that training and what it looks like, it's definitely going to make some people uncomfortable. It's hard to address some of these issues. So, but it's important for everybody to know what that expectation is. And the thing about this kind of training and follow through and expectation is that it's always ongoing, right? It's like staying in shape. You're never there because you get new people who come in, you get new families, you get new students, you hire staff, you invest in them in the training and the support. They take a job somewhere else, you hire somebody new who maybe doesn't have that background. We always have to tend to that. It's a maintenance issue that's not just a maintenance of a building and making your yard look good. This is about how we attend and maintain and support our staff to best be in the position to serve our students. Ultimately, that's what we're here for.
Okay, awesome. Now, I need you to know that when you and I agreed that you would join us on today, I've been bombarded by some of your students on things to address,
Yep.
and some of them you have. Let's circle back. When we're talking about the achievement gap at about 30%, what has your office, your department, your district identified as the challenges or the barriers to that is causing a 30% or a 75% failure rate?
Yeah, I think there are several areas we would have to take a look at.
Right.
One is the ability to make sure that students are really engaged. There's two things. One is showing up and the other is being engaged. So if you're just present in the classroom, but not truly engaged in the learning, then you're not going to really be able to benefit from that. That's what we need to make sure we are understanding, that are our students truly engaged, not just present. They have to be engaged. And part of that is also the connection they feel with their teachers, their support staff. They don't feel that connection. If they don't feel like they're being supported, it's going to be hard to engage in that learning for sure. So that's one of the pieces. We've also talked about, as Mr. Howard was referring to, disciplinary matters. That has a huge impact. If students are not in the classroom, they can't learn. So it's not just the suspensions. We've talked a lot about just the time out. So if you're sent down to the principal's office on referral, you end up spending an hour down there waiting to be addressed, you're missing class time and instruction. So we need to make sure that we've got our students in class so they can maximize their learning.
Awesome.
That's definitely one of the areas that we know is a barrier to our students' learning, is just flat out not being in the class, either because of attendance, engagement, or discipline.
Okay. All right. So now I've got some stuff that the kids and the educators have sent to me to present to both of you, and we're going to hear from you, my brother. I'm trying to, maintain social distances, brother. I don't want to turn my back to you. We love the work that you're doing. So when we start talking about some of the gaps that are falling short of the goals that we've set for our great district, you and I both received over the last year or two some demands from the students. Give us a progress report on some of those things.
Yeah, so there are a couple of areas that we want to make sure. One is to make sure that students feel heard. So if they're reporting an incident that has happened, that there's follow-up. They understand that their concern was taken seriously. So when we do, for instance, if there's an incident that involves a student and an adult in the room, then we do have that follow-up with our HR department. All those pieces are there. The hard part about getting that that receipt of saying, yeah, we've received it, is we have privacy issues with students, we have privacy issues with the adults. We're still trying to figure out a way to make sure that students know we've heard that. I don't have that perfected yet, but that is a piece that we are well aware of, to say, how do we basically let students know we've got that? There are some challenges, there's no doubt. There are times that students have reported things and things probably have not been followed up on. There are many times where students have reported things and they have been followed up on. They just might not feel or see the fact that it was followed up on. And that's the part that we're trying to navigate, that piece with our labor partners, to make sure we're respecting the rights of the employees and respecting the rights of students. Sometimes that happens between students. If there are issues between students, we don't share discipline outcomes of other students because they have privacy issues too. But ultimately, as you've been talking about, if the end result is no change in behaviors or attitude or culture within the building environment, then we're not doing what we need to be doing, and it's not supporting the students in that way. Right. It doesn't matter. We can give them a receipt.
Right. So we circle back, and we began that that you want to create a climate where the children are heard, felt, affirmed, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if it was an offense or student on student, I'm going back to our conversation. As a parent, I don't want the other family to know our business.
Right.
But the other student will know that this student's been disciplined. In the old days, he got suspended or whatever. If I'm a parent of a student that felt lines were crossed by adult staff, how can you create a climate while protecting what needs to be protected, but affirming that it was dealt with?
Right.
I think that's what folk are asking for, and it needs to be a part of the systemic structure. I see some hands coming up. Yes. Give me a second. I think this sounds better. This monitor was coming in and out, Brother Tony, but I think it's doing better. Come on, Patty.
So I have a question from a person, but it's 3 parts.
Okay.
So the first part is, what race and social justice lens is used when hiring all staff at Tukwila School District?
Boom.
That's the first question. And then the second, how do we recruit teachers that are culturally responsive to our community? And then the next is, how is this embedded into the hiring and retention process?
Yeah, so the first part is, so the second half of this year, race and equity, there is a policy that the board has on race and equity, and my commitment to the board was by the end of June, we would have an adopted race and equity toolkit. That's something that many cities and counties have. Seattle Public Schools has one of those too. So we have that now.
I'm going to say it's July 1, July
Yep,
2.
we have our race and equity toolkit. We've got that. So now we're using that as a toolkit. Now we have to train staff on what that toolkit is. When you have a toolkit, what you do is you use that in the decision-making process to highlight issues. It doesn't mean you solve every one of those issues, but it does mean you bring that to the fore so that you know it's an issue. Sometimes you have to make a decision that's, let's say, a compliance issue with the state or the feds, and it doesn't really work for Tukwila, but we have to do it because it's a compliance issue. In other cases, things like hiring, we want to make sure that we've got people represented on the interview teams, the screening teams, so that we can really try and recruit people and use that lens. For me, what is important to me is in the hiring process that we are listening to candidates' answers around race and equity responses. So it's not just one question that's about what do you feel about race and equity. When you're asking a question about discipline, am I hearing race and equity in your answer about discipline? Right. Or am I hearing your answer of race and equity about curriculum adoption, right, whatever that may be. Right. So it should be embedded in all the answers. Right. And when we go through and talk with people who are on the interview team, it really is hear the look fors and listen tos when you hear answer. That's part of that race and equity lens for the hiring process.
Awesome. Now, and let me chime in. For those who may be listening to the broadcast and have grown fatigued with the race and equity conversation, I can dig it. As an African-American man, I'm tired of it too. But when you start talking about educating students and you have an achievement gap, and a lot of times the achievement gap, you can usually chart it along cultural dynamics. And then when you start looking at the data and you have 72% of your teaching staff is of a particular demographic, and then they're saying they can't reach the kid, then we got to figure out how do we bridge that gap. And some of it is cultural, some of it is how it's woven in the system. So we have to, at a certain point, put our hands on what we need to wrestle with if we're going to get it down. Is that right?
That's correct. So
I want us to keep it in context. All right. Did you get all three of those through that?
Yes.
Okay, come on, next question.
We have a ton of questions coming in.
And I have some
try
here
to get
too,
as
so we're
many
gonna
as
get-
we
yeah.
can. Next question, is Tukwila School District communicating with other school districts to work together on students' future education?
Yes, we do. We're actually part of a coalition called the Roadmap School Districts. So that is South King County School Districts. It's part of South Seattle, Renton, Kent, Federal Way, Auburn, Highline, and Tukwila. And together we speak a lot and talk about how we can coordinate approaches to support our students not only in K-12 but after. So that's called the Roadmap School Districts. That's been around for probably 8-10 years almost. We track things like college admission, completion of college. I'm actually the co-chair along with Kevin McCarthy, who's the president of Renton Technical Institute. And so I'm the co-chair who's kind of responsible for the K-12 side, talking with superintendents. He talks with the college presidents. And we meet about 3 or 4 times a year, college presidents, superintendents, and other central office staff, to talk about how we can support our students, especially students of color, to be successful after they're out of high school. That's what it's all about.
Awesome. We're going to give Brother Flip a break. Drink you some water. We don't want nobody pig-piling on you. And I know it's not fair, Mr. Howard, on your first day to throw you into the Shark Tank. So I'm going to give you some softball questions. Some of the demands of the students working with over the last 2 years, what is the timeline and how can we roll out curriculum? Better yet, give me a synopsis of your job description as Chief Academic Officer before I start throwing questions at you. Tell them what that means.
Okay. Well, my main job is to actually work with teachers, principals, and actually make sure the curriculum that we have and the assessments we're using are current,
Yes.
up to date, and we're measuring the success of our students. So that's K through 12. But in my eyes, it's K through 16, because we want to make sure students are matriculating to the next level. They not only are graduating, but they are actually getting there, and they're successful while they're there. And so we want to make sure they're getting there, and that's looking at Running Start. That's also looking at our 4-year completion rate out of high school going into their next level of life.
Awesome. I figured that, but I know they want to hear it from you. So the question the students had were presented to Dr. Herndon, but it falls in your lap. What are and where we and how do you anticipate moving forward with a timeline of rolling out a developed history and English curriculum that is inclusive to Black history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There were some challenges with, okay, when you're going to bring the history into the curriculum instead of just a February Black History Month, et cetera. And so what are the challenges? What are some of the steps? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, I think it starts with planning.
Yes.
Sit down and you look at the standards, and you can incorporate any culture into the standards starting not at 9th grade. You can do that starting at elementary level and work that into the curriculum. So it's not a sense of can it happen, it's we can do it.
Yes.
We can make it happen. So that's not an issue.
No.
Also, I think the other piece of that is sometimes we can bring standards in, but let's start bringing in some outside people who actually have background in actual different cultures, and get our teachers and our experts exposed to that. And let's start there, bringing outside people in, make sure we partner with them, because teachers are great, but a lot of times teachers don't have the latest background, the latest information about different cultures, and sometimes they're novice, and they need to be supported by outside people coming in and doing that. So getting with the right people to actually come in, vet that with our teachers, and as we vet them with the teachers, then we can start to infuse that into our curriculum.
All right. Thank you. And I was seeing more recently that hit, I don't want to say front page, but our laps. June 19th is Juneteenth. I was taken aback on how many people had just first heard of Juneteenth. Now, this is part of U.S. history. This is not Black history. This is part of U.S. history, post-Civil War, antebellum history. And yet, U.S. history is taught, but it's not in our curriculum.
Right.
And so here we are, 2020, since 1864. So these are conversations that we're missing the full story of our history. I see some more questions coming in.
Yes, 2 questions from YouTube Live. First, will we have SROs next year? And second, due to the increasing COVID, will students go virtual next year?
So that was on my list of questions. There's some dialogue that we don't want SROs. SRO stands for?
Student Resource Officer.
And that actually means police officer in your building. There's pros, there's cons. I'm sharing what the students said. What is our Tukwila School District's response to that?
Yeah, and I was at that particular meeting as well with the students. Am I out?
No, keep talking. We'll figure it out.
I was at the particular meeting with students as well, and also I've been speaking with the city, Police Chief Linton, as well as our school board members and staff. And I know that the intent and conversation with the police chief is, he wants to make sure students are safe. We know that school shootings are a big issue. That's one of the main things. SROs are not there at school to just make arrests. In fact, they want, policies and procedures, school staff to handle what they have to do. But that's his biggest concern. He doesn't want any school shootings on his watch. Having been a superintendent in a place that had a school shooting, It's not something anybody wants to
I
have.
don't want it on my watch in the community.
Nobody wants that. One of the worst things that can happen. So I think there's further dialogue that we said we were going to have. My thing is, I want to make sure the whole community can have some conversation about this.
And I was in that meeting with you,
Yep.
and I like how the dialogue morphed. Hey, we don't want SROs in the building too. Is there a way that, because that's not the problem. The problem is, and the students articulated this well, that when I see you, this is what I see.
Right.
I'm more afraid of you than everything that can come in our building, particularly coming off Peck Highway.
Yeah.
That's problematic. So is there a compromise that security presence can show up
Right.
cognizant of how they present?
Yeah.
And I'm not with, that thing is, no gun, no bad. No, that's not what you mean. We do have to own the fact that relational dynamic is challenging.
Right.
And I think there's a lot, and I appreciate and respect Chief Linton, that they can do to build that.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, and I think the two parts about that that we wanted to highlight was, one, that, the city pays for that. That's in the city budget, the SROs, which I think some people were saying, school districts shouldn't be paying for that. And a lot of other districts, school districts do pay for that. In Tukwila, the city does, and they're willing to continue to do that. They want to make sure students are safe. And Chief Linton even said in that meeting, too, he's willing to talk about how things
I think that's
might be
healthy
different.
dialogue.
So we're going to continue that dialogue over the summer. And we'll see what happens. But related also to the second question, which is, are students going to be virtual? We are working on a couple of models right now. There are two pieces about the opening of the school year next year, both virtual and in person. You may have heard State Superintendent Reichdahl talk about, hey, fall's coming, face-to-face. Well, that's going to depend a lot on the county and the stages where you're in. We can't have everybody back in school every day like it was before. So we've got two groups, an elementary group, a secondary group, meaning middle school and high school, that have been working and planning on what are these models going to look like. We will have students face-to-face. Students will have time to be in the building, but not all students, not every day. So we're continuing to work through what exactly is that going to look like. There will be some virtual learning. My concern about that, again, if I'm using that race and equity lens, I know that the challenges we were already talking about connecting with students and engaging, are just magnified in a virtual setting. And that's one of my biggest concerns about having students continue that virtual learning is, how can we help close that gap from a distance? Hard to do. The gap's already there, and when you're distance learning, the gap's even bigger. That's my concern.
So put it in context. I've heard conversation about a hybrid model that has in classroom with extend virtual.
Yes.
One of the challenges we acknowledge, we have educators in our congregation, is that there's folk that don't have Wi-Fi, don't have internet, don't have computers, and English isn't their first or second language.
That's right.
And so there's some hurdles in there. So they're working on it. But those are some challenges that have layers to them. Next question. Oh, they moving fast.
Yes.
I got a bunch over here, so don't worry about it.
There are a ton of
Come on.
questions coming in.
We'll get as many as we can.
The next one says, all departments, math can highlight the creation zero or the golden age of Islam. Science and astronomy can highlight Pacific Island culture, who travels across the Pacific navigating by the stars prior to Magellan. Simply, we can update our maps so they don't reflect realistic shapes. Why are the European countries larger in our maps?
Yeah, so that's being a former geography teacher. I was actually a world geography teacher. There are all sorts of kind of maps out there. So there are certain types of maps that do show perspectives that are different, and I think maps most people take a look at. You can kind of see where the center of the map is too, so there's a lot of questions and concerns about that. And if you look at some maps based on just geographic size, it would look a lot different than what most people would see in a map, for sure.
And let's move forward. So as people start, as this current social unrest around systemic racism, et cetera, that's another example. if you travel the world and you see the maps, depending on who made the map, you'll see what's in the center. When you go to Europe, our map has United States, and then you remember it had the map with Europe was on both sides because it couldn't fit around. That's because it's an American-centric map. If you go to Africa, Africa's in the middle. But the truth about education, my challenge for education is bring forth accurate information and data and challenge our students and educators to think. Don't distort it through the biases of our lens. Tell the truth. Shape the young minds to analyze, criticize, problem solve for themselves. But there are, like we see, interwoven biases that come out. It's a simple rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. He who has the pen draws the picture. So there it is. So that thing is, there's layers to that. Yeah. There's layers to that. Moving on, is there anything else you want to add to some of the responses to some of the, I want to say, demands or requests that were made?
The only thing about that, so ethnic studies was one of those demands, you know, and so I think that's what we're trying to address. I am committed to going through that process. The school board's committed to dedicating budget dollars to that, because you can go through a process, but if you don't have money behind it, you know, it's probably not going to happen. So we do want to do that, but as Mr. Howard was saying, you got to plan it out. You want to be realistic about a time of implementation, how much cost it's going to be, especially during this time of thinking about what an opening is going to look like in the fall. We also know it's going to be more expensive because of the things that we have to do. So we don't know what that impact is going to be on our budget, but it's a commitment we need to make. And to the point of the question, ethnic studies is not just an English language arts or social studies adoption. That's part of it, but it really is, how do you approach this in all subjects at all grade levels?
Awesome. And I think that question actually spoke to it because they spoke to astronomy, geology, geography, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And so I'd love to see not just Foster, I'd love to see academia take a more neutral approach to that. And that's a challenging task, but I'm hopeful for it. Here's a question from one of your students. What is happening in our classroom as a response to racism at Foster High School since 5/20? May 20th. In the class I attended, I didn't see much happening except my teachers telling the class to brace themselves for a conversation on racism at Foster's. That must have been the year before.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was a virtual class or last year.
Or it might be, but it didn't say the year.
Yeah, so I think this gets, again, back to some of the training. If your staff, if the teaching staff, whoever are in the classrooms, if they're not ready to have that conversation about race and address the issues and the uncomfortableness, it's probably not going to go very well in the classroom. So we need to make sure before people start to try and address that with students that they're prepared for what may be coming as an answer to what that may be, or the questions that students may raise. And that preparation does take, I just want to make sure people are ready for that. You know, before you dive in, it's good to know how deep the pool might be or how shallow it may be, because we want to make sure people are just prepared for that. And again, it's not a one-time thing. It has to keep going. It's with new staff, and there are different levels of training. You may have started at one spot, but educators, for the most part, I know for me, I'm a lifelong learner. It doesn't stop. So even in race and ethnicity, anything about that, I can always learn too. There are a lot of cultures that I don't know about around the world. And Foster is one of those communities that has a lot of different cultures in it.
Word, I appreciate that. I will say this, as an educator, most of our assignments have a timestamp. And I want to say this to Tukwila, Seattle, Tacoma, Kent, Renton. The timestamp is now for this. Whether you're comfortable or not, we don't have another generation of students to practice on. We have to equip our students to have these conversations. You know why it's so hard for adults to have this conversation? Because we were never taught how to do it as young people. So we run and hide from it. And I'm afraid that our nation won't survive if we continue to duck the courageous conversation around race and equity. Sister Patty?
The question that's coming in on Facebook, it says, how is the district investing time and money in the social, emotional, and mental health needs of students of color at all educational levels? Are all staff trained as trauma-informed educators and in restorative justice practices?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the simple answer to that, especially the second part, is no. I know all our staff are not trained in that. So that's part of the training that we have to go through, and dedicate what that social, emotional, and trauma-informed instruction looks like, especially at the secondary level. I can tell you that through a grant we received last year called Learning Improvement Network Grant, which is focused at the elementary level, and social emotional learning is part of what that focus of that money is. We know we have money dedicated to do that training to have an impact for our students at the elementary level. And Mr. Howard and I had this conversation, and I've had this conversation with staff. My job as superintendent is to make sure whatever we invest in at the elementary level is carried through all the way through the next other levels too, because if we only do that social emotional learning and training for staff at the elementary level, students expect that. When they get to the middle school and we don't have that, then it's just all going to come apart.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that it's all for naught, but it does not maximize and build on what we can truly do. And that's what we need to do. We know we have to do that. Social emotional learning for our students, it not only supports the students, but by doing that, our staff, I think, have better insight into the families as well and can connect better with the homes.
All right. So I have a meeting Friday at 1 with a group of your students that have given me these questions, and many of them were sophomores, juniors, what have you. So when I go meet with them at 1 o'clock Friday, and they ask me, I'm a returning junior, returning senior, other than COVID, what's tangible, concrete, quantitative, measurable steps have changed from the last time we had this conversation? What do you want me to tell them, or what would you like them to tell? What would you like to tell them? They're watching.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, one is just seeing the follow-through on what they have. I want to figure out how can they know that when they have registered a concern, what is it that they feel is going to say, okay, I get it. I know you heard me. And unless I hear from them because each person is going to be a little bit different on what they feel is there. So we're trying to work with the staff, not only at Foster, but also at Showalter, to say, what is that? Part of what I think Mr. Howard talked about, and Showalter has been doing, are the restorative practices that really reduce that kind of discipline and address the issues right there. And I know the Foster staff are really interested in that. Showalter's been doing that this year. And I know Foster staff want to get trained in that too. So that's one of the trainings they should see, are those restorative practices, to say this is something tangible, this is different on how our concerns are being addressed right here.
Circle back. Many of your Foster high school students were Showalter.
Absolutely.
And so when you just said it, if they show up at Foster,
Yep.
and they have restorative justice peer-to-peer, even peer-to-student staff, and you get to the high school, the stakes are a little higher, and that's not there. So that's a tangible, concrete way to address that.
And they've even said that. Some of the Showalter staff have heard, hey, we had these restorative practices last year. This year we didn't have that. So, you know, they get a little confused about the way in which things were being addressed at Showalter that were different than Foster. So we need that consistency.
Particularly with no suspensions and stuff, that becomes a very hardy tool. Yes?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I see another question coming.
Okay, YouTube, I believe. How will we follow up to assure that classrooms are implementing these better curriculums for social justice? For example, the Since Time Immemorial curriculum on Native peoples is not implemented.
Yeah, again, that's the process that we go through. Since Time Immemorial is an actual physical, tangible curriculum that you would adopt. And I know different places have, some have adopted that, some have thought of different ways in which to adopt a curriculum that might be there. So that's one example. But we do have a process for adopting new curriculum, and so you could watch how that process unfolds. There are conversations when we get into a curriculum adoption committee. They look at the materials that are there. They look at the pros and cons. They look at the impact of, they should be looking at the impact of race and equity, the concerns where that is, and then make a determination if it lines up, as Mr. Howard was talking about, are things aligning and supporting what it is that we want to do. Not every curriculum does that, since time immemorial is an example from the state level that does. But there are other curriculums out there that people think, hey, this is great, you should adopt this. Well, we want to make sure that it actually lines up with what it is we're expecting.
So I have no idea who sent that question, but my experience and years and background in education tells me that was a teacher. Now, here's what I think the question is. If time immemorial is a curriculum, what I do know about teachers is, I don't want to take no shots at teachers. Is there a piece in place that if I as a teacher don't want to teach the curriculum, where's the accountability in that?
Yeah,
And we like to do what we're comfortable with.
Sure.
No question. Can I say it like that? Yes, can I say that? Teachers were masters of our own domain, you understand? Go ahead.
Well, there is, if
I think that was the question.
yeah, if we have an adopted curriculum,
Yes.
staff are expected to implement that curriculum.
And if they don't,
That's an
Yes.
that's an evaluation process, because you are not implementing the curriculum as assigned.
Yeah.
So there's a process in the evaluation process. There are two ways in which you can address things with staff. There's
Yeah.
a discipline process, there's an evaluation process. So discipline process really covers incidents that may happen. Evaluation process is about things like implementing curriculum. Are you following the expectations of what we have? That's an evaluation process, and the state has a guideline about, there's a whole form that you fill out online. You rate teachers. That then becomes an evaluative process if we have a curriculum that's been adopted and a staff person is not implementing that curriculum.
okay, let's circle back. Point taken, I got it. Come on, CAO.
I add in a couple of things.
Come on.
What Dr. Herndon is saying is absolutely right. And I think what we want to do, even before we get to these two pieces, is to have buy-in.
Yes.
We want to sit down, have conversations with our teachers, partner with them. And so when you say, hey, not only do we put questions out there as parents, we want parents' roles and students' roles to be at the table and partner with us. They're all stakeholders.
Right.
So if they don't see something that is in the curriculum, we can sit down and have conversations to help develop that and partner, and then we can collaborate how we're going to put it in, at what grade level, where is it going to be at. At the same time, we can actually put that into our CSIP, our actual school performance plan, and say, okay, we're going to do this as sixth grade, or we're going to do this as seventh grade, we're going to do this at eighth grade, and you should see this. And parents know it's coming, teachers know it's coming, they already agreed to teach it. So we never get to the process that Dr. Herndon's talking about. Those, to me, are last resorts.
Right.
And we never want to get to the last resort of doing anything. We want to do it based off of a partnership.
Fix that further upstream.
Right. If we start a partnership at elementary, middle, and high school, and parents and students and community people are stakeholders, then we all work together to make sure we're getting what we need. So we see right away that, hey, we have partnerships already. These partnerships are saying this is what we're going to be doing. Teachers know what we're going to be doing. And then as we all come in together, we're not surprised, because guess what? We know what's happening. And we see it along the way, and we're working with it. But the other piece of that is we can tweak it and make it better.
Yeah.
So we're always spiraling up and spiraling back, because guess what? At sixth grade, we were doing this, but at 2022, that's outdated. So we need to change that around to make it more applicable to what's happening in 2022 versus still doing something that may have been in our curriculum when we were in high school back in the 80s or in the 70s. They said, well, I learned it, it's the same thing. No, it's changed. We've learned so much more about education now. We should not be doing the same things that we were doing back then. I firmly believe that our students could actually get their high school diploma by the time they're in 9th or 10th grade. So we have room to actually infuse a lot of different things into our curriculum to actually help our students be engaged personally with some of the items that are being talked about now, as well as educate our teachers to be able to teach a lot differently.
All right, point taken. And I think that was at the core of the question. And I think that was the core of the challenge, maybe not last year, year before, we were dealing with buy-in in the building. If all the teachers aren't bought in with the culture and the climate you're trying to make. Here's where my challenge is as the advocate for the young people is they can sense it, they can feel it, and they're telling you where it shows up, and they want to see us do something about it. And I'm glad they heard you say the discipline and evaluation. The challenge is the students often don't get to see that part. Is there a burning question? Because I have two I want to close with.
Yes, there is. So this word keeps coming up.
Come on.
It says accountability
Yes.
in capital letters.
Yeah.
And who holds the teachers accountable? But this is the question that is being asked also. Is the Tukwila School District willing to engage in outgoing training for all educators and staff in trauma-informed care and race equity? Is it more than just a one-time workshop/training?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if I didn't mention it at the beginning, that's definitely part of it. It's not one time, it's ongoing. That's a conversation with our labor partners because we want to make sure they're all bought in too. And my conversations with them have been, they're supportive of it. So now it's figuring out how we differentiate that training, because the other thing is you don't want the same training over and over again. It's got to build on what you're doing. And some people are farther along that journey. We want to support them too. But yes, getting that investment in all of our staff, and it's ongoing, not one time, not one day in August.
Yeah.
We're talking on a monthly basis, regular basis.
As for me, in the work that I've been able to come alongside and serve in my little small capacity, we were having this conversation, and we got to come to a close, is that there has to be buy-in on the culture that we're going to have for our district and in our particular building. And this is what the stakeholders of that have to look like. And your customers, your consumers, your clients, if they don't trust that you're buying into their future, it doesn't matter if you went to Harvard or Yale. Because if we're at a point where 30% mastery in my basic public school math means 70% failure, then we've got to deal with why we haven't been able to reach 70% of our building. And we have to stop blaming that on the student. You're the one with the degree. You're the one with the certification. And so if 7 out of 10 people are not getting it, we've got to be willing to adjust how we're doing it.
And if it's 7 out of 10 in 2020 and 2021, it better be, less. We got to be closing that gap every year. So if in 3rd grade you're behind, you're not there, 4th grade you need to be getting closer, 5th grade, you can't always turn around in 1 year.
No.
But we need to keep closing that gap so that students and families see the benefit.
Yes, and we've got to evaluate the fact.
Absolutely.
Shaquille O'Neal cannot shoot free throws. The percentage show it. If I can't teach 7 out of 10 kids in my class, where's the evaluation? What's the response and transparency? And I'm not anti-teacher. I taught for almost 20 years. I'm just saying that's the sense of urgency we can't practice on this generation. Thank you. Welcome. We've already passed the time. Welcome. I'm social distance dap. Go ahead. You want to say something. Say something, Doc.
I know you closed, so I didn't want to add anything
Come on.
extra to it, but this is a whole mindset.
Yes.
What Dr. Herndon's talking about doing is changing the mindset in Tukwila around education.
Yes.
And it doesn't happen in one shot or two shots. You're talking about changing a whole culture.
Yeah.
So if you had a culture that has not been successful, it takes a while to get teachers and educators and everybody else to see what their role is in changing that mindset. So everybody plays a role in that. Parents, students, educators, everybody has a role. Vendors, everybody in the community have a role to play. Pastors, they have a role to play. So as you're doing your part, we have to make sure everybody understands that the mindset shift starts now.
Yes.
So that's what Dr. Herndon is bringing to the table, and that's what you're going to see happening over the next coming months.
And my question to you was, what role can we play to help? And that wasn't rhetorical. As community leaders, pastors, imams, rabbis, business owners, whatever, how can we help you all accomplish your goal? Because these are all our babies, and my babies are grown.
Yeah, and I think, as has come up a lot, social emotional learning and trauma-informed instruction. I want to figure out a way where that kind of awareness also exists within the community. I know the families know that them personally, but a lot of folks are then dealing with that inwardly. And so how can we better equip our community, our families, the people who want to support us in a way that also makes them aware of that too, to reach out and help in that way. It's going to be different training than being in the classroom and being an instructor. But if we can successfully do that, that's how a whole community creates that safety net to support our students and families.
Thank you for chiming in with us. We went a little long, but it was worth it. We have a mantra around here at Church by the Side of the Road. What we can't do alone, we can do together. And we're here to say to you, Dr. Flip, to you, Mr. Howard, we are in this thing together, and what we can't do together won't get done. So we're here with you. You have my number. I'm here. I'm gonna roll up the sleeves and come on, let's go on the field trip, come in the classroom, let's show us where you need, and we'll be here with you and for you. To all our attendees, members, and our newfound cyber members, we're praying with you, praying for you. I got some announcements I'm supposed to announce. They've given me my announcement signal. All right. One, this Wednesday, COVID's conversation. Oh, next week is a youth takeover. It'll be our local youth and youth leaders. Our theme is Our Youth Matters, is a play on the contemporary theme. We're going to deal with the youth response to where they are, what they're going through. I've been working with them, shaping some of the topics, and I'm like, child, we got 65 minutes. I'm meeting with them. We're going to hear what's on their heart and how all of this is affecting them, everything from education, college, going back to school, COVID, race and equity, the whole 9 yards. So we're going to narrow that down. Come and join us. Bring your young person. Our King County is in phase 2. And my understanding is that houses of worship have been open for a percentile of folk. And so stay tuned we're watching those numbers. Stay tuned to the emails that you're getting from CBSR about where we are and what we're doing on Sunday services. And I want you, if you're in the at risk with age or pre-existing condition, you stay home, you stay in your pajamas, and you live feed on the Facebook and on the YouTube. Don't you come around here. And I love you. I want to see you, but I want to see you well. Amen. Yes, so we're still live streaming, and I think that's it. Did I miss any other announcements? Shout out to our production team for putting up with us. We got 2 heavy hitters. We couldn't cut them off. We needed to hear from them. Fly Right Productions, Brother Tony, Sister Patty, Sister Proctor, Brother Aaron. Is that young Kent on the ones and twos? Kent is on the wheels of steel doing it. God bless you. I love each and every one of you. We're praying for you, Sister Cheryl. Speedy recovery, Brother Simon, Brother Warren, all of you. We're praying with you and for you. We love you. We love you. God bless you. Good night.